Good evening, everyone in Alberta, Canada, and beyond. It is Wednesday, November 20th, 2024, and I'm Kerry Lambert, and I welcome you to an evening of solutions for a new Alberta, brought to you by the Alberta Prosperity Project, also known as APP. APP's purpose is to educate, inspire, and unite all Albertans, businesses, and organizations to protect their prosperity, individual freedoms, rights, and self-determination by empowering the Alberta government to restructure Alberta's relationship within or without Canada. If you can, please share this webinar. We are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Rumble, as well as after this live, we're also on other video and audio sites like Apple, Spotify, BitChute, and Vimeo, etc., under the Alberta Prosperity Project banner, as well as under the Chris and Kerry Show. Let's jump to the website here that I have just... Oh, it's been a busy few weeks. I know we haven't actually done a webinar in a little while, and I think we'll be probably touching on why we've done that. But if you can, please check us out on the Alberta Prosperity Project website, and that is at albertaprosperityproject.com. Go there and see what's going on, and if at all possible, please support us. We do rely on donations in order to get do this show, to basically populate the website, to get things going, as well as to do chapter events and etc., talking about sovereignty and the Alberta Prosperity Project pillars, which of course are on a referendum on independence, taxation, pension, policing, immigration, and employment insurance, which we I know we'll be talking about a lot more in the next little while, because there's a lot of things that are going on. APP memberships are 1 year for $20, 2 years for $30, 3 years for $40, and please, if you can, make a donation. Tonight's episode is called Canadian Bills, and that's in regards to all the bills that are happening in our Canadian Federal Parliament and Senate, and I'm sure we'll also be talking about some of the bills that are closer to home in our own Alberta legislature. My guest tonight is Sharon Polsky, President of the Privacy and Access Council of Canada. She's been on our APP webinars a few times, and maybe we should make her our official Ottawa correspondent. I'm sure she would definitely like that. This is a live webinar, so if you want to make some comments and ask questions, please put 3 question marks before your question so I can flag it, and we'll try to answer it. And please, again, share. And with that, I'm going to bring Sharon on again. Hello, Sharon. How are you?
I'm doing great, Kerry. How you been?
It's been busy. I think the last time you were on here was in May, and again, I mean, we take a recess. The government takes a recess during summer. It's kind of like a really extended vacation, kind of like what teachers do, only like a couple extra months, right? And then they come back in, this flurry of activity with a whole bunch of different bills that they've been sitting on for a little while. And you know what, before we even get into all that, why don't you explain to people again, I know you've been on a few times, but explain to people who you are and how you got involved with what you're doing. Because, the whole process, we just assume that laws get made and we'll talk about that process today, because I think we're a little bit more educated on what's going on now. So, yeah. If you don't mind, just
absolutely. But yeah. I, like everybody else, needed an education in how this all works, and I'm still learning.
Oh yes.
But where I started, I mean, I had no idea what I was going to do after I got out of high school at 16 years old, and eventually, between desktop computers and when a PC didn't talk to a Macintosh, didn't talk to a dedicated word processor, to me they all did the same thing. It was like driving a car or truck, standard shift, automatic. They all do the same thing. Not everybody takes that view. To me, they do the same thing. The control might be on the column on the floor. They do essentially the same thing. So it was easy to me. The legal field that I worked in, it came naturally between that and apparently being a wordsmith, a stickler for correct grammar and language, and finding the right word to convey the right message. It all fit together terrifically. And then I realized new laws were coming in, the technology was being developed. There was a moment in one law firm I worked in, and this is long before we had such a thing as call display. And it's at the time when you still had a graphic artist do a design for your letterhead, send it out to the printer, you get back boxes and crates of printed stationery. It all gets stacked into a room, and at the end of that room, I was walking past it one day, and there was a device, oh, probably 20 inches wide, maybe 15 inches deep, a few inches high, and it had tractor feed paper where it's continuous paper, just reams, and it goes through, it gets printed, each line is a record, and then it cascades down on the floor. And I went close and I looked and I saw that it was an incoming call from whatever phone number to the name of the person in the office and their local and the name of the person who was calling. And
I know where you're going with this. Yes.
there was no
Exactly.
but it was all available.
Yeah.
And one thing fell into another, and to me it just was a natural progression. I also saw how cavalier many of the lawyers I worked with were with sensitive information and with computers. They
Yeah.
didn't know the first thing about it. Some of them, I'm not kidding, had to ask someone, "Hey, can you turn this thing on and get it working?" But they were the experts, and oh my goodness. But you move it ahead a few years, and I it was just a field that either developed or I fell into, or I'm not even sure, but to really, it was a natural progression to put everything that I had been doing together in this field of information privacy and access to information consulting that I've been doing for more than 30 years now. And
Wow.
I've also headed up the Privacy and Access Council of Canada, which is people across the country who do the same work in access and privacy in government, private sector, and even nonprofit, even though they're not covered by the legislation.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And I totally thought you were going in a different direction, but wow, like just imagine back then, before emails and all that, we talked about you couldn't, when something was being mailed, it had to land in your mailbox. And the question is, well, I mean, anybody can just go in and grab your mail because it's open. It's not secure and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, that's a federal offense. That's exactly, you can't do that. And yet we're looking at other things where this information is basically freely available for those people that want to be able to break the law in order to do that. And here you come up with that one that's right from the dot matrix printer, right in the lawyer's office or right in your office, and anyone can freely just have a peek at what conversations are going on. And essentially, it's the same thing, even with email. In theory, if you were really, really good at it, maybe 20 years ago, you'd be able to intercept emails and see what people are reading.
It was easy. Come on.
It was easy back then. Absolutely.
The information that was printed out, now we would refer to that as the metadata about a communication.
That's right.
In the early days, people would get very concerned about locking, protecting documents as they were sent. We didn't have Dropbox, that kind of thing. So they'd put it into a PDF, locked, password protected PDF.
That's right. Yeah.
And that was the easiest thing to break open. And I'm not a hacker, but as long as you took the PDF, said send it in an email, once it was attached to the email, you could open it up. All the locks were broken. Simple as that.
So fast forward to now. You just came back from a meeting. I'm just going to quickly show, just because it's, no one can actually hear it anyways, but you were just in a parliamentary committee meeting out in the Senate in Ottawa. And here you were presenting, there you are, talking about Bill C-26, which I'm reading the actual line right here, an act representing cybersecurity amending the telecommunications. So tell us how you got involved in that, and really what ended up happening with this, because I think this is fascinating. This is the behind the scenes stuff that nobody really knows about. Again, everybody just assumes that there are certain steps that go into making a law and it just happens. And I think it's important to realize exactly what that process is.
Well, as I said earlier, I'm still learning. The first time I appeared before a committee was another Senate committee, the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee. And I forget what the piece of legislation was there, but it was completely new. It's like someone said, well, why don't you speak to the bill? I said, what are you talking about? What's that? How does one do it? Well, get in touch with the clerk. I had no idea what they were talking about. A clerk? I learned quickly, and anybody, literally anybody, can put up their hand, send a note to the clerk of a committee that is discussing something that's of interest to you as an individual, as a professional, as a member of a group, as a representative of an industry, anybody, because that's part of our democratic parliamentary process. And if the chairman of the committee chooses you, and I think it's by a group decision because each committee has members of the governing party and of all the opposition parties. And whoever decides, it's from each party. It's not just one party. So there is some nonpartisanship there, which is refreshing. And if you're chosen, each committee runs a bit differently. It's up to the chairperson. But in essence, you're chosen. You can either appear by video conference, which I avoid doing, even though it takes a lot of time to go to Ottawa. Never mind the prep time, because you have exactly 5 minutes as an opening statement. Beyond that, you easily can be cut off. And I've seen people, thank you, your time is up, next, mid-sentence. So you prepare, and then I go to Ottawa, get there a little bit ahead of time, see the room, meet the clerk, do the courtesies and the pleasantries. Take your seat, your appointed seat. You don't get to choose. And then you are there and you do your opening. Whoever else has been invited as a witness does their opening. And the rest of the time, which tends to be an hour per session, is question and answer, and you have no idea what the questions will be.
That's true. Yeah.
You're on the hot seat. And then, as you say, laws just happen. No, they don't. They're introduced. And it might be whoever the sponsor is standing up in whatever legislative assembly saying, I'm introducing this bill. And maybe saying how wonderful it will be and what the terrific outcome will be, the glorified objective. And that's it. That's first reading. Second reading, they go through it a little more closely. Then it goes to study. Then it'll go back to the House of Parliament and then to the Senate. I'm not entirely certain. But at some point, it goes into what's referred to as clause by clause, where literally each clause of a bill will be negotiated.
Okay.
Part has gone through and decided, I want to change this. I recommend a change in that clause, and that party in that clause, and that clause. Then they get into discussion, and it's all right. L12. Do we agree on that? No, it conflicts with C12-1, but N14. And to follow it, it's worse than a bingo game trying to follow who's referring to what, because we don't have the program. They do. So yeah, it's a bit open, but there's some accessibility, some opacity to it still. And eventually, once it goes through, there's no guarantee that anybody's request or recommendation is adopted. Everything that the witnesses, whatever I said and the other witnesses on Monday and at any other session for this bill would have said, there's no guarantee that any of the suggestions or recommendations will be adopted. Although I have to say there have been times where things that PAC has put forward, that other civil society groups that we sometimes work with have put forward, have actually been adopted.
Wow.
We've made a difference. It's wonderful.
Well, and that's the whole point. That's why we do these webinars, right? To tell people what the process is, how to get involved, because the stuff that's easily been happening over the last few months, people have reached out to me and say, how do I get involved? How do I get involved? And it's like, honestly, we're kind of all making it up as we go along, because we didn't go to law school. We haven't been involved in parliamentary or legislative procedure before. And it really just comes down to, you have to self-educate yourself on what's going on, right? And with you, I guess, at least in the role that you are, you're a specialist in regards to privacy. So really, that's where you're looking at, and you see any bills that come along that might infringe upon those rights, etc. But everybody else that contacts me or through the Alberta Prosperity Project, they're looking at everything, and it's so vast. And that I'm going to kind of go off on a bit of a tangent, and then I'll get back to this, talking about how many bills there are out there. Well, if anybody's interested, I'm just going to put in the comments here. Actually, I probably should have labeled that. But these are the bills that are currently in the Parliament, right? So there is C, which is basically read in Parliament, and S dash, which are in the Senate. So usually the process itself goes, I'm just going to go back another page here. So again, you can go through the actual procedure. There are different types of bills. How do they? Well, they get introduction, first reading, just like Sharon had already mentioned, second reading, committee, consideration of committee, and even with our own legislature, they go through different ways of doing this. But essentially, they're read, the second reading, some sort of reporting, they get back a third reading, and then once that portion is done, then it goes to a Senate or a different committee, and essentially that's what happens in Parliament here. And then, as long as everything is all good and they've made their changes, then it can become law. And of course, it has to go in for royal assent, right?
But it goes back to the House, and they can disregard all the changes.
Yes, they can. You are right. It's like a big veto.
Yeah. Never mind what the people have said that they want.
Yeah. So now take this, everyone. I want you to digest this. Let's just say we're working on one bill right now. We've done first reading. We're looking at it. There's like dozens of pages. We're looking at it. We're kind of going through it. It's gone through second reading. We're consideration in committee and legislature committee of the whole, that sort of thing. And then it comes up to third reading. That's one bill. Let me show you how many bills there are in the active Parliament right now. Is that a lot? Because wait, there's more. Oops, and it's so many that my computer screen froze. I just want to point out how many bills every MP, or in the case of bills for legislature, how many bills every MLA needs to digest and get a good working view of. And again, that's what's happening in Parliament. That's what happens in Senate. Senate is the same thing. They have to look at whatever is currently in Senate and then go back and forth. How is it possible, and I'm being totally sarcastic with this comment, how is it possible that anyone can keep track of any of these bills, especially when they're all numbered?
But you'll notice an awful lot of them are at first reading, maybe second reading, after literally years. A lot of them stagnate. They're introduced, I'm sure there's good intention, but there's higher priorities that leave these languishing. Very often, bills that are introduced in the Senate apparently don't really go anywhere. This time, there's been a couple that, from a privacy perspective, are concerning, that have gone almost the full way. They're knocking on the door of receiving royal assent, the S210 in particular, for age verification, which is going to mean basically to protect children from being able to see online what they're not allowed to see in real life. Which they will have to be age verified, but to make sure that it's not a kid pretending to be the parent, everybody's going to have to be age verified.
That's right.
Which means all the platforms will be age verifying everybody and collecting that much more information. Although we are assured that some of the technologies that will be used will only collect the information long enough to do the age verification, but trust us, cross my heart, I promise we're going to delete the information right away. We have to trust them. We're told to trust them. And I'm sure they mean it.
So they say trust, but again, who's policing all this? If you go to an average website, and again, you might have a better idea, you log in and you don't realize it until you say accept cookies and blah, blah, blah. How much data is actually coming off of my browser to a site?
No, Carrie, back up. It's long before you can.
Long before they even know that.
It's as you enter the web address.
Yeah.
And when I was in Senate the other day, I gave this example, and it's terrible, but it's still there.
Yeah.
The Canadian Association for Mental Health, a year and a half ago or so, I did a quick scan. There's a little tool I have. It's a publicly available one,
Yeah.
developed by some American investigative journalists who don't like the idea of being constantly surveilled. And I did a quick scan of the CAMH website. And I'm just looking, here we go. They had 60 third-party cookies, 22 ad trackers, Google Analytics. And when you visit this site, it tells Facebook. That was November of 2023. I called them out on it. They changed it, went to 12 trackers, 25 third-party, Facebook and Google. I mentioned this in Senate on Monday and checked this morning. They've eliminated Google. They have 59 third-party cookies, so they're down one from originally, 20 ad trackers, and they still tell Facebook before you even see their website.
Wow.
The fact that you have called up that website has been transmitted. And like everything else, the artificial intelligence, whether your visit is used to train their AI, likely, whether it is used to indicate a pattern, that user, they don't know who I am. They might not know my name, but the unique identifier of the device that I'm using, which tracks back because they've been tracking all this data about each individual, they know exactly who I am.
Yeah.
I have not yet consented to them, to CAMH sending anything about me to anybody, much less I consent to cookies. I refuse all cookies.
Yeah.
It's
I
a
think
scam.
I think we joked about this at the last time we were talking in terms of like, I just happened to be looking for a blender, and all of a sudden now in Facebook I have 1,000,000,001 ads on a blender, and everyone we joke about it, right? But there's so many other ways in order to get that information out. Like you don't actually have to do a search. Your phone is always listening, right, CSIS? No, I'm kidding. But it is amazing how much data is out there. So you're the privacy expert. What can we do to limit the privacy that's being exposed?
Well, one of the things, and we talked about it, is get involved.
Yeah.
One of the shocking bits I found, I was looking at some legislation in the UK a few weeks ago, and then I took a look at something similar in Canada, and the number of comments. Remember I said anybody can put in a comment? Even if you're not selected to appear or you choose not to appear, you can send an email, a letter, a book, write something and submit it to the clerk of a committee, a comment, a request, shred the bill, glorify it, whatever. In Canada, there might be a dozen comments, couple dozen. In the UK, on one bill, there was more than 1,200.
Are they just more aware of things, or they know how to do it, or we're Canadians are apathetic? I'm just going to call that out. I think that's
either it's apathetic or complacency or futility, a sense of futility. What's the point? Nothing's going to change anyhow. Well, I disagree, because the one thing we are certain of is if nobody speaks up, if the majority remains silent, then you will not be heard. And what you want and don't want won't be addressed, because the only ones that are being heard are the ones that maybe you disagree with, but they have taken the opportunity, as we all ought to, of speaking up. So that's one thing. Speak up. And it doesn't mean on every single piece of legislation, but be aware. I mean, people, how many hours, hundreds of hours do we all spend, myself included, doom scrolling and saying, oh, but I didn't know. The information is there. It really is readily accessible. Inform yourself, because the government and the public policy choices of what curriculum to fund, that's a choice. It's been I look back now and it's almost as if it was planned to keep people ignorant of the civic process, the judicial processes, legal rights and responsibilities, how to do these things, how to engage in any critical thought.
Yeah. Sharon, I have to put you on pause because I need to check the hockey game score. Give me a second.
There's priorities, I get it.
I know, like we're distracted by so many things and kept busy that they've got the perfect scam going on.
Well, and people say, but somebody should have. Why didn't anyone tell me?
Yeah.
And I ask, why didn't you? You're somebody.
Yeah.
Why didn't you inform yourself? Why didn't you ask a question? A lot of people don't even know who their MP is or their MLA.
Yeah, that's right.
So
I guess that would be a good first start for everybody. Just find out who your MLA is and who your MP is. And
yeah,
and I'm hoping that everybody on here, you know what, even just as a quick test, if you know your MP and your MLA, put it in the comments. You don't have to actually go into which riding and all that, but you could even just say, yes, I know, or whatever. I just want to see if there is, number one, if anybody's listening, and number two, if they actually do know their MLAs and their MPs. And again, it would be different if you've actually had a conversation with them. I've had conversations with both of mine, and one's an NDP and one's a PC. Obviously, I get along with the PC guy, but
it doesn't matter what
it doesn't
party
matter at
they're
all.
with.
No,
They're
yep.
approachable, and
They are.
even if they're from a party that you don't see eye to eye with on everything, it doesn't matter, especially if they are the person in office. They need to know who all of their constituents are.
That's true.
And what
That's
the views of all of their constituents. One thing I've suggested for people to get involved is make it an election issue, but long before election time.
Mm-hmm.
Get in touch with your riding association, your constituency association, and say, constituency board, you're the ones that are going to approve a candidate. Whatever candidate you approve, they better have this view and that view and not want this and be determined on that, or I will not vote for them. So there's your marching orders from one of your constituents.
That's right. Yeah.
Then get a hold of the candidates and say, I would like to know what your, not the party, but your views are on this and this and this.
Mm-hmm.
And see what they say. Yeah. And tell them, this is an election issue. My vote will be based on whether and how you respond to me, because I want to know your views, not the party line.
Yeah.
Join a party when they have a leadership review. That's your time to have a say. Complaining about it afterwards is meaningless, and pounding a keyboard really is quite meaningless because nobody has to pay attention to that. It might be, it's satisfying to get that rage and that frustration out and complain about it with like-minded people and this should be done and that should be done. But that never answers the question, who should be doing it? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm a big believer in self-responsibility. It's up to me. Of course, that's how I was raised. You need a helping hand, look at the end of your arm.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And I totally agree. And it really is that the people that say to me, I'd really like to help, but I'm busy doing this. And I always say, we all make our own decisions. We all, we're all adults. We're able to time management. And there are sacrifices when you're doing this. Wednesday, I joked about a hockey game. I don't even watch hockey anymore, to be quite honest. But if it was a hockey game on, I'd be a little inconvenienced because I'd have to be doing these things. But there's the sacrifices we all have to make.
I think it's a choice.
I think it's absolutely a choice. And I think people really do need to step up and do that. So I'm not going to keep going down that road but thanks again for at least mentioning that portion. So you were dealing with Bill C-26. So tell us a little bit about that bill and why you were brought in.
Well, the bill, as with so many of them, it's well-intentioned, and I get it. There needs to be updates to a lot of the federal legislation because some of our laws, whether it's the federal private sector privacy law, PIPEDA, which is 20 years old, or the Privacy Act, which is 40 years old, Wow. 40, like from the time of fax machines being introduced.
Yeah.
Or telecommunications. A lot of the laws were developed at a time long before the internet, long before social media, long before the technology we use today. They have to be updated, and our Five Eyes partners and other democratic nations have certainly updated their laws. We're lagging behind in a lot of respects. So they have to update it, and that's great. And the problem is some of the suggested updates are really undermining privacy and civil liberties. The language is vague enough, and it has to be. I appreciate the language in law has to leave some latitude, because you cannot make a completely bulletproof list of circumstances in which this may happen and that must not happen. There's got to be latitude for circumstances, for situations, for urgency. So there has to be some vagueness. But when it comes to the way the laws are being written these days, the vague language is so open to wide interpretation. There is the very real potential for danger for individuals and organizations. So C-26, I mean, it does, if you remember Enron in the States,
Oh yes, yeah.
where the Sarbanes-Oxley Financial Accountability Act, I think was its full name, the SOX law. It came into effect saying that from now on, the head of an organization will be responsible for what's in the financial statement of the company. Well, they always were, but now the law said that they were, and companies in the States and Canada, around the world, turned themselves inside out to be SOX compliant. Why? Because suddenly the head of an organization was facing $1 million fines and jail time.
Yeah.
In Canada, most privacy laws are toothless. Even in the public sector, if there's a fine levied, the fine is paid out of this pot of taxpayer dollars and delivered over to the other department's pot of taxpayer dollars. And then they say, we need more taxpayer dollars to fund our budget. And nothing changes. It's like an endless shell game. The C-26 introduces some fairly stiff liability for the head of an organization, and I think that is terrific. And of course, some people and some of the speakers on this bill said, no, that's a bit harsh. We shouldn't have that. Well, if nobody's going to be held accountable, what's the point? We've already seen for the last 20, 40 years, nothing changes, nothing happens, and companies can do as they please with impunity. That doesn't help us. This bill also has language in it. It was changed from the government would be able to have an organization do or refrain from doing anything to, I think it's do any specific thing or refrain from doing any specific thing. Wow.
That's the way it was worded?
That was the amended language, yeah. But that also means that, and of course, it might get defined in regulations.
Yeah.
And that whole development process is foreign, opaque, magical, I don't know. One day, it might be the day after the legislation receives royal assent. It might be 2 or 3 years later. All of a sudden, there's regulations that define what's allowed, what's not. Until then, we have a law, and we're not sure what is or isn't allowed. But the problem is, when you have vague language requiring an organization to do or refrain from doing something, that means they could be ordered to break encryption, to put in back doors, to put in surveillance, wiretap. We don't know.
Yeah. Wow.
Huge danger in it. Yeah. So we've got that. There's also in C-26 something very similar in appearance to the American FISA court orders, which is the secret court where a judge can make an order. I won't know that an order was made about me. until I am served with it, and
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I'm not allowed to tell anybody. In the case of C-26, I might not even be allowed to participate in the application at court.
Wow.
I mean, whatever happened to being able to face your accuser, or
Yeah.
democratic freedoms and open courts? And I appreciate in some circumstances for national security or individual safety and security, it's not a good idea to have an open court. Certain things do
Mhm.
have to be shielded,
Yeah.
but these secret orders, the current wording of the law doesn't put any limits on how long an order can be kept secret, which
Well,
brings
that's interesting that you said that, because, of course, now dealing with a lot of these court cases, including our good friend Chris Scott from the Stop Cafe, as well as the guys in Coots, et cetera, it seemed to be a lot of that back end dealing where they would have a conversation with the judge, get some sort of a court order, not even talk to the actual accused, and then all of a sudden show up at the door and chain the cafe shut, as an example, right? And so that's already happening. Never mind. But I guess with this, if C-26 goes through, would they limit that, or is it because the fact that you just said it's like, well, they haven't even addressed that situation yet?
Will they limit it? We don't know. I mean, this law is going into clause by clause debate in the Senate this coming Monday. They're wasting
Okay.
no time.
Yeah.
What will happen is anybody's guess. I mean, to their credit, really, the senators in the room the other night were very concerned. And I know there's independent senators and some are aligned with this party or that party, but inevitably they've been appointed by one prime minister or another.
Yeah.
So that could imply some allegiance. I disregarded all of that. They all were very concerned
Yeah.
about the potential for not just general public being affected, but I make it personal. And I
Yeah.
say, you and you and you, and I look
So
at
they
them.
realize, yes. Yeah.
You are the ones that have the power to make this change, and you are also the ones that are going to be affected by this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I did watch the your committee meeting, and then I watched a couple of the other previous ones, just kind of scroll through just to see what they were talking about. And my take, and I you can let me know if I'm totally wrong, maybe just on my little bit of skewed. It sounds like they just wanted to push this through and then fix everything after the fact, because the longer we wait on this whole telecommunications and privacy, the more Canada is going to be in danger. So we need to get something out there. Is that what you felt like?
I've seen that on this bill and a few others where people are saying, well, perfect is the enemy of good if we wait for perfection. And
Yeah.
on C-27 to update PIPEDA, people have said, well, it's taken 20 years to get to this. We can't afford another 20 years
Yeah.
to get it
Yeah.
right. We need to push this through now. And I'm the first one to say that's wrong,
Yeah.
because I'm not looking for perfection, but something that is proportionate, that is reasonable, that is practical, that is lawful.
Yeah.
Don't just throw something in and make it law so you can tick a box and say, here, we made a law. We did what we said we would do. We created a law.
Yeah.
Make it a good law. Bad
Yeah.
law is more dangerous than no law at all.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important for all of us to speak out,
I agree.
so
So
that they
you
don't just push it through.
So you've been dealing with C-26 and C-27. Any other ones that you're personally involved with, or anything that you want to speak about?
S-210 is one of my favorites. That's
Okay.
one that started in the Senate. It's the second or third attempt, and we see the same sort of language in the UK, the Australian Parliament. There's a few other places in the world that are putting through or have put through legislation. And it's all based on the idea of protecting children from not being able to see online what they're allowed to see in real life, porn. And they're saying, well, it's very easy. We'll have the technology companies make sure that anybody that goes to the part of the website that derives revenue from the commercialization of porn doesn't allow children there. Well,
Mhm.
that's great. But as the technology people have said, there is no technology that can do that and do it accurately.
Mhm.
And the lawmakers around the world are saying, that's okay, you'll figure it out, do it. So the onus is going to be on the platforms to make sure that when I want to visit whatever, that I'm not underage. Now, keep
Yeah.
in mind, in Canada, underage might be, what is it, 16 in some places, 18 in some, 19 in
I
some,
was just gonna
13.
I was gonna say that because then how do they keep
That's,
track of
and
IP addresses to do that? And what happens if it's a Netflix account and you have kids that are living in the West Coast, and here I am in Calgary? Oh, did I just say that? Yeah, but that's kind of where that is, right?
it's worse than that.
Yeah.
Just do a search on Amazon.ca for teen porn,
Mm,
which is
wow.
illegal. It's
Yeah.
underage.
Yeah.
But do a search, and the I did that, and I took a screen capture and posted on Twitter, and tagged the senator who introduced the piece of
That was
legislation.
on Amazon.
Amazon.ca. Yep. And it was more than 10,000 hits. And the first listing is for magazines. Playboy covers were never that explicit.
Wow.
So does that mean Amazon is going to have to age gate everybody before they can search for
For anything.
everything? Because
Yeah.
they might
Right.
search for that, or for sex toys that
Yeah.
children aren't allowed to go into a sex shop.
Yeah.
They can get a full range of them and see, and there's videos of
Yeah.
how to use them also. I know. But the lawmakers are insistent that this will protect children, but it won't. What it's
Mhm.
going to do is have platforms or the specialized vendors whose business is the tech developing and selling the techno and profiting from the technology to do the age gating, whether it's
Mhm.
age assurance or age verification or age this or age that. The semantics are remarkable. um, that's where it's headed. And it seems to all be to improve the commercial activity. Then
Mhm.
you step back into another aspect of all of this. And you know the way you buy a product and it's got the CSA sticker, the Canadian Standards
Oh
Association
yes. Yeah.
for
Yeah. Yep.
sale in
Yep.
Canada. A lot of things have standards. A lot don't, but many do. I was intrigued to find out that there was standards for the size of a seat in a bus. And a lot of that had to do with different body sizes and women's safety. I know it never occurred to me.
Oh,
You're right.
heard
If
that.
a
Yeah.
seat is too high, women are generally a smaller stature than men who tend to be much taller.
Yeah.
If a seat is too tall, is there a safety aspect for women? Who knew? When it comes to technology, there's standards being developed, and the Privacy and Access Council of Canada, we have a professional certification program. The standard for the criteria for that actually became the foundation for the national standard of competency for everybody who does access and privacy and data protection work. Terrific. We're nonprofit. We don't derive any revenue from that. Great. There's
Mhm.
others though, where on the age assurance, age gating, facial recognition, all of those technologies, the people who are involved in the standards development are from the industry.
Mhm.
And inevitably, they are loyal to their employer, to their industry association, to their
Yeah.
paymaster, I suppose.
Yeah.
And what they are saying needs to go into the standard is what their members, what their company is developing. So you see where I'm going with this, Carrie. The
Yeah.
standard for age verification will be what these companies produce.
Yeah.
It is well aligned. And here again is a place for everybody to get involved because the standards development program in Canada, whether it's through Standards Council of Canada, the oh, they changed their name. I should know it by now. CIOSC is what it was.
Okay.
The ISO, IEEE,
Oh yes, yeah. That's
all
right.
of
Yeah,
that is
international standards. Yeah, yeah.
it is voluntary. You can say, pick me, I'd like to join this working committee, this technical committee. Some of
Yeah.
the organizations you have to be invited by somebody who's already involved. So it's not just everybody knocking on the door. There's a little bit of verification of credentials. But other than that, you can just say, I'd like to join, I'd like to participate. It's an hour or two a month, maybe, to review a document, have a meeting to discuss what you like, what you don't, what you want to change, why,
Hmm.
and make a difference that way.
Yeah.
That's another way that I think would be important for a lot of people, a lot more people to get involved,
Yeah.
because there tends to be the same group of people
Hmm.
over, which is great for continuity, but getting some fresh eyes on it, I think would be a really good addition.
Yeah. When you were talking about the about products and
Yeah.
services and all that, and what came to my mind is you've probably heard the story about the light bulb mafia. It very you could even do a quick search on that, but basically when light bulbs were invented, whether it was Edison or whatever, that's another conspiracy thing. But if it was invented, the initial light bulbs could last like for 100 years. But they decided that, well, why create something that will only last for 100 years when we could make it that they have to be replaced every year? And so they got all these light bulb manufacturers together and they said, this is what we're going to do. And yet there were some other rogues out there that said, well, no, I'm going to make one that lasts 25 years, 30 years. I'll sell it. I'll make more money. No, they are no longer in business anymore. It's only the people like Sylvania or whatever that were all this light bulb mafia that said, no, we're going to make it so that light bulbs only last 2,000 hours or 5,000 hours at the most. So everybody has to buy new light bulbs.
Well, it's a
And
good business strategy for continued revenue streams.
that's,
And that's the
but there's,
problem we see with the automotive industry. Cars last longer
I
now.
was, I was just going to say, it's like everything. Everything is done that way so that we can be in this perpetual state of buying and fixing and
That's right.
and yeah.
You buy a car, it'll last longer. But you want heated seats, that's by subscription. You want radio, that's by subscription. They have to have
That's
some.
exactly. You're right.
And
That's a side to that. Well,
look
just like
around your
Tesla.
house. And I mean, seriously, look around your house at the appliances.
Yeah.
Um, the the washer and dryer in my parents' house has been there since I think the 60s. It's mechanical. Click,
It's a dial.
turn,
Yep.
pull. It works.
Yeah.
And how often have you or I replaced our whiz-bang electronic ones with all the amazing digital settings that we never use, but go on the fritz?
Yeah. My
And
dishwasher, a stupid
that's right.
computer.
You talk to a repairman, if you can find one these days. There was a repairman in for the fridge several years ago. He said, "Oh, LG, I love it because all I do is I take the cap off the hinge, the door hinge. There's a little
Yeah.
protective cap to keep the dirt out, and I put my sensor in. It gives me a complete readout."
Hmm.
I said, I've wondered, do they program these things? Oh, Polsky, she didn't take the extended warranty. We'll give her 13 months, 6 days, and 14 hours and 2 minutes. He said, that's about it. It's all computerized. I said, but I thought that was conspiracy theory. He went, no. Now,
Wow.
there is one, I just saw it tonight, where an ad tech company is going to be collaborating with television manufacturers so that the ad tech is installed automatically, is a foundational component of your television. They,
Really?
yeah,
So
they
they'll
all,
already know your age, probably your demographic, where you live,
oh,
and
it's more
etc.
than that.
Yeah.
It's everything you watch, whether you speed through the commercials, how many people are in the room, who uses which clicker and which individual, because, based on biometrics, they can tell
Yeah.
who's clicking what. The technology, TVs often have cameras watching
Yeah.
the room. So, watching TV in your birthday suit is no longer so much fun once you know that's happening. Um, but they'll be able to watch and identify who's who in the room and what you watch, and of course, personalize the ads. Again, language, personalization, it's a wonderful thing.
So, is there any law out there that will prevent any of this from happening, or is it seem to be like the manufacturers will just continue pushing this envelope until they're slap their wrists? Like,
Well, slap their wrist. I mean, sure, Google and Meta, they get slapped to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, but when they make multiple tens of billions a quarter net,
yeah,
it's lunch money for them. So will anything change?
they'll just
No.
keep doing it.
These companies, are there laws to prevent it? No, because all of the laws, federally, provincially, internationally, the GDPR, they say it's by consent. Except consent is a fallacy right now.
Hmm.
I consent to, look at the language. I consent to you collecting information from me and about me, using it for business purposes, sharing it with your partners and affiliates.
Yeah.
Well, if it's a for-profit business, just about anything that's not illegal that improves the bottom line can be construed some way or another as being a legitimate business purpose.
Yeah.
It sounds facetious, but really use your imagination, and you don't have to, because that's what a lot of companies do.
Yeah.
And if they stray, it doesn't really matter because, like I said before, the laws are pretty toothless. If you find out that they've strayed, yeah, you can challenge them, but at what price?
Mm-hmm.
You get to hire a lawyer and challenge it, and they can, eventually it'll go to a commissioner, a privacy commissioner, whose budgets are chronically limited, another public policy choice made by the government.
Yeah.
So they can't do what they're supposed to in a timely manner. They have to be very careful in how they spend their very limited resources as to what complaints they actually get to investigate. Bill C-27 to update PIPED is going to make it even worse because, yes, it will give the Privacy Commissioner of Canada order-making power. Now all he can do is recommend and ask nicely. But it also introduces something that will be novel in the world, a review tribunal, which by all indications might end up being politically appointed. So the commissioner, again, you make a complaint, they get around to looking at the complaint, assigning it, it's investigated, a decision is made, and they
Yeah.
say, yes, complainant, you're correct. Organization ABC was wrong. We say they have to pay a $10,000 fine. Then you say, thank you very much. Then the decision goes over to this new tribunal that we expect will review or recreate the entire investigation in case something was missed out of abundance of caution, due diligence, whatever. So there's time for that. Then if they say, you're right, Commissioner, 10,000, or they might say, no, 100,000, a million, whatever. If they say, yes, a fine is to be paid, the offending organization then has legal recourse and can challenge the decision in federal court, an appeal court, and maybe they get the chance to take it all the way up to the Supreme Court of Canada, which, as a former Privacy Commissioner of Canada said, will delay the right of action for 7 to 10 years, because it's only after that entire court challenge is exhausted that one of the new features, a private right of action, you get to sue, it kicks in after that.
Wow.
So then you get the chance to hire a lawyer and go after the company that 1 or 5 or 10 years ago violated your privacy, and you can challenge them in court through the same process if you're still alive, if they're
Yeah.
still in existence, if you don't go bankrupt as part of the process. How does that improve anything?
Yeah.
And Bill C-27 also increases the number of exemptions under which organizations can collect, use, and disclose our personal information without our knowledge or our consent. Again, it seems to be designed to improve commerce
Mm-hmm.
only. It's discouraging, and that's why I do what I do. And really, everything I do, everything everybody in the Privacy and Access Council of Canada does, it's a volunteer organization.
Wow. Well, good on you for doing that. I mean, we're volunteering too through
Yeah,
AP.
these are important things, and it's not because I'm a bleeding heart. I'm certainly not, but these are too important to just let slide.
Absolutely are. I was going to mention too. So I don't know about you, but I subscribe to a bunch of different software stuff, like for whether or not I'm doing podcasts or if I'm doing graphic arts or music or anything like that. It always seems at the end of the year I get these these updates to the software agreement, and then you scroll through and they're like pages and pages and pages. And I'm one of those guys that don't read the entire thing, believe it or not. But I scroll through the first little bit, and then I skip the meat and potatoes, and then I look at the very end, because it's so overwhelming and whatever. And in the end, I just say, yeah, because I need this piece of software. That's, I need it, because if I don't use it, then I don't have a job or I don't do anything like that. And that's scary, because really everyone is in that same boat. If you have an Apple phone, or you belong to Samsung and a Google Play, you're signing up to those. Yeah, it's the agreement, and the agreement basically says if it's on your phone, we can do whatever we want.
That's right. It is an all or nothing, and that's referred to as consent.
Yeah.
And we have no choice, especially now that governments are pushing everybody to go digital for
Yeah.
convenience. I don't know whose convenience. There's a lot of people, entire segments of society that will be excluded.
Mm-hmm.
Whether my elderly parents, they used computers forever. They don't anymore. To
Mm-hmm.
tell them they have to go online to have a question about their old age security answered, it's not going to happen.
That's true. Yeah.
There's big problems with it, but when you talk about not reading the so-called privacy policies, I'm one of those that actually does. I know you're
Yeah.
shocked.
Yeah.
Apple, you mentioned they changed theirs because I put in a complaint to the commissioner, but I know they changed the wording here.
Yeah.
They unchanged it there. It's all um it all looks good. Last time I checked the Google most popular, most frequently used Google properties, the combined privacy policies were 38 pages long. That's a small book.
Yeah.
Do people read it? No.
Mm-hmm.
But Mark Zuckerberg himself said in his testimony before the US Congress that even he doesn't read these things, and he knows that most people don't read these things, except the law, certainly in Canada, requires that organizations obtain informed consent before or at the time of collecting the information.
Yeah.
Here's the head of Facebook acknowledging that most people don't even read these policies
Yeah.
and are giving their uninformed consent, which means he's just acknowledged that they're in violation of the law.
Wouldn't that be great
Um,
if that could happen with something that may have happened about 4 years ago, where we were kind of all told to do something, and we just assumed everything was all good? So I don't think that's going to happen. But so I guess my last question, having gone through all of this and seeing, the multiple levels of privacy and all that, I guess the short version of this question is, do you think we're overgoverned? I
in
know
many
that's
ways,
a
in
rather
many
open.
ways, yes, but there has to be.
It's a
How do
fine
I?
line to walk.
It's not that we're overgoverned.
Yeah.
Is there have to be rules that's part of society and democracy. There's got to be certain behaviors that are agreed upon and not agreed upon.
Yeah.
But when you are governed on the minutia of your life, on the picky little things, and the big things are ignored.
Mhm.
So whether I must include pronouns after my name, and believe me, some people have insisted that I must. That's compelled speech. No, I must not. Yet criminals, I think a lot of viewers have their own views of the current justice system in Canada, and we see that every day in the newspaper. I was in Toronto a couple of weeks ago speaking at a global conference, and it was the day after I went into Union Station to take a train, that there was a mob outside. Where is the justice? Where is the public safety? Where are charges? And it's not the police that lay the charge, it's the Crown that lays the charge. It's the police that get criticized for not laying charges, but there again, it's a matter of public education or lack thereof as to how the process works. So, people who are causing mayhem, who are disrupting traffic, are allowed to do that. But if I stay too long in the intersection or I jaywalk because it might interfere with traffic, I can get a ticket. Is there too much
True.
regulation? No, not
Yeah.
necessarily, but yes, perhaps towards the wrong things. The focus needs to be realigned.
Yeah, I agree.
And
And it'll be interesting to see what
Yeah.
happens like in the next few years, because like you said, and one of the webinars we did before in terms of digital ID and all that, and what's coming down the pipe, privacy, and we just talked about S210 with the age verification. There's a lot of stuff that we're doing things for convenience. We have a phone because we can do everything convenient. We can pay from our phone because it's convenient. At some point, I just want to maybe just get a cabin out in the woods and get out of here.
A lot of people, the younger generation especially, and I've given up trying to track Gen X, Z, whatever.
Whatever.
A lot of younger people are dumping their smartphones and going to stupid phones because they're sick and tired of being controlled by it. Because they are designed to be addictive, because they are infiltrating our lives and they are monitoring absolutely everything we're doing to our detriment. And when you say convenience, you're right. We keep being told, trust it. No, give me a reason to trust.
Yeah.
We're being told it's for convenience. And I keep saying, whose convenience?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's more convenient to be able to make a phone call from wherever I am. Sure, I don't have to look for a payphone. I don't have to borrow, the use of somebody else's telephone.
Yeah.
But when you did, people were a lot more friendly. And somebody knocked on the door. Hi, can I just toppled on my bike. Can I call my mom? People let you in and they said, sure, are you okay? And put a Band-Aid on you.
Yeah.
Now, nobody opens the door.
No, that's true. They all question when I get a knock at my door. Who's there?
That's right, because we're told if you see something, say something. Life is scary. It's the message for so long, certainly since 9/11, has been, don't trust anybody. The world is a scary place. Trust the government. We'll take care of you.
Yeah,
that's frightening.
It's very. Well, I mean, there's 1,001 other things we could be talking about, but I think we've wrapped up what I wanted to accomplish today. I know some people are probably online asking about specific bills that are in and right now, and I mean, we could go on and on, but we're not going to do that for this one. But I did want to. There's a couple of quick comments that people have said. Here's a funny one. Yeah, funny in a good way. Peter says, more and more, it's seeming that the best approach immediately upon the reestablishment of credible governments might be an ominous bill rendering all federal legislation post-2015 null and void.
Well, let him, Peter, why don't you send an email or an old-fashioned letter or postcard, and when you send that to your MP, there's no postage, of course.
That's right.
So the postage
MLA or MP.
Seriously, communicate with your MP.
Yeah,
I'm not being facetious, seriously.
Yeah, SB says it's time to start having town hall meetings, invite the MPs and MLAs to answer some questions. Absolutely. They anytime I talk to an MLA or an MP, they always say, oh, if you want to get a group of people together, I'll be more than happy to talk to them. And now, having said that, both my MLA and my MP seem to have a town hall meeting. I was going to say when I started the sentence about once a month, but maybe it's once every 2 months, but at least it's regular. There was a period there where my previous MLA, and I'm not going to mention names, I think he had 1 or 2 town halls the entire 4 years that he was here. So, people are listening and people are getting involved. And I think, again, people, if you want to get involved in the process, reach out to your MLA, reach out to your MP. And I think we've said that a few times tonight. So I think that's
and I
good.
think when it comes to town halls, if you're
Yeah.
the one hosting it, you get set the agenda. If you're
That
attending
is
a
very
town
true.
hall that the MLA has scheduled, then it's their agenda. So you might
That's
want to take control of that situation.
That's brilliant. That's awesome. Well, Sharon, it's always great to talk to you. Do you have anything else that's happening in the next little while, and any committees you're going to talk to? Anything?
I was away for almost a month in Asia. I came back and ran off to Toronto, then Montreal, then unexpectedly to Ottawa. I have to catch my breath and figure out what is going on, because I know an awful lot is, especially with the parliamentary proceedings, is
Yeah.
going on, what, 2 months now? Things have been
Mhm.
stalled. There certainly seems to be an appetite to push through some laws, whether it's just to be able to say, yeah, we tick that box, we got a law in,
Yeah.
or I'm not sure, but there's some things afoot in Ottawa. I've got to consult with some colleagues who have been working on it in my absence. There's a lot to be discussed and a lot for everybody to get involved in. It's not too late. In
Yeah.
fact, this, because it is crunch time politically, might be one of the best times to speak up, reach
Perfect.
out and say, hey, I see this law is, it's not being changed. You disregarded that recommendation, because all the briefs, all the evidence is available online. Good bedtime reading, especially if you want to be put to sleep. Go through it, seriously.
Yeah.
And reach out to them and say, hey, make sure you do this. I want that. Please don't do that. Of course,
Mhm.
be polite and respectful, but be clear.
Yeah.
And that's the only way that they know. And I heard long ago that for every one person that reaches out to their elected representative, it represents something like 10,000 people.
And it probably does. You're right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
your voice counts. Every voice counts.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, thank you. Before you leave, though, I do want to mention again. People have been asking about Bill 293, in the Senate. Again, that I actually had that up here. It's in regards to the Pandemic Prevention and Preparedness Act. We're going to be doing another webinar very soon on that, so stick around for that at some point in the next week or two. But the other thing that's happening right now in our own Alberta legislature is the Bill of Rights, and of course that's been a hot topic ever since it was kind of introduced. Even when we were talking about it, I guess in July and August. And so they did first reading on Monday, August 28th. They did second reading on the 29th. And then it basically went to the Committee of the Whole on the Wednesday, which was prior to the UCP AGM. There was some wording in there that was basically it's the demonstrably justified clause that came from the charter, in which they actually said anything after this, as long as it's demonstrably justified. If we're in war, or the government says, we should take away these rights, we can do that. And that was put in. And of course, there's been this flurry of activity back and forth about this. So I actually said on a panel yesterday in front of the legislature, Chris Scott was there, Sean Buckley from the National Citizens Inquiry, Marilyn Burns, who is also one of the lawyers with the Coots 4, and a couple of other people, Marty up north, and Dr. Roger Hodkinson, and we were talking about what can we do in terms of this Bill of Rights. Now, at the time, we weren't really sure whether or not it is going in for the third reading. Now, that doesn't mean it's going in for royal assent or anything, but it is third reading, which is like really, really close to that. We kind of talked about that. That happens tomorrow. And it would have been, if I was able to do a webinar last week on that, I definitely would have been. But if anybody is interested in learning a little bit more about that, you can always go to, there's two things. go to the chrisandcarryshow.com. I know I have a banner for that somewhere in here. Most people know if they watch it, the chrisandcarryshow.com. And if that doesn't satisfy your appetite, then go to stayfreeab.com. That shows off the Bill of Rights. And the other thing I'm going to put in the comments right now is when they're debating, when they're actually talking, if you want to watch some really dry material, you can always watch the House of Commons and you can always watch the legislature. And I'm going to put the two links in the comments. So tomorrow's link is for the Legislative Assembly, and that will probably happen in the afternoon, about 1:30 till, I'm going to say, about 6 or something like that. That is when they're supposed to be doing the third reading of the Bill of Rights. And if you want to find out what's going on with that, I'll be glued to the virtual screen, finding out what's going to happen with that, whether or not it's going to get passed, etc. That's a long story, and I know we're going to be talking more about that in the next couple of weeks to come. But I did want to at least let people know what was going on with that, because I know that's probably, if not the number one question this week to me, it's been definitely a high number 2 or 3. So if anybody's interested in that, you can go and check that out. Sharon, have you even watched any of that or know anything about the Bill of Rights? And it's okay.
No, I focus on federal.
You were over there.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah,
and,
exactly.
So 13 jurisdictions. It's limited resources here too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm just going to go back to this just because it's so funny. Bills. That's what's currently in our parliament. So, yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Sharon. Always great to have a conversation. We'll be reaching out and in touch and finding out what's going on in the future with you. Thank you. Okay, thanks. Okay. I'm going to push Sharon to the back, and I'm going to get a little bit emotional on you guys, if that's okay. So before I do sign off, I'd like to leave you with some sad news. One of our APP chapter leaders passed away. John Martineau and his wife, Kate Graham, headed up the Calgary chapter of APP. He's been sick for a few years, and they had to step away from APP last year and instead focused more on their own project called I Am Albertan, which you may have seen at the UCP AGM and other events. I Am Albertan's mission is to bring Albertans together to celebrate and preserve what it is to be Albertan. The group is nonpartisan and wants to share the history of Alberta with people, places, and events. And you can find out more at www.iamalbertan.com. I'm just going to throw that up here as well. Go check that out. I've lost track of where I was going to say. Yes, I was actually hoping to have John and Kate join us on a webinar to talk a little bit more about this. And I'm going to reach out to Kate and see if she can come on and talk about that sometime soon. John was immersed in politics and enjoyed reading and getting out to events and having great discussions with people. He would never step away from a chat, and more often than not would initiate the conversation. And on behalf of everyone at Alberta Prosperity Project, we wish condolences to Kate and John's family and everyone that knew him. He will certainly be missed. Thank you so much. I'm going to log off now. You guys have a great rest of your night. And I've lost control of this. There you go. And I will see you guys in hopefully next week, next Wednesday. All right. Have a great night, guys.